This is the voice of the Report of the Week, signing on. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone listening. This is VORW Radio International, the voice of the Report of the Week. It is Thursday, the 8th of November, 2018. You also may be listening to this broadcast on Friday the 9th, Saturday the 10th, or Sunday the 11th of November, 2018. VORW Radio International is a weekly light entertainment program which features a mixture of my miscellaneous talk, commentary, discussion, as well as listener-requested music. You can hear this broadcast online via TuneIn Radio, SoundCloud, via the TuneIn and SoundCloud radio apps, or on the international shortwave at your frequencies of 9955, 9395, 7780, 7730, 7570, 5950, 5850, 5130, and 4840 kilohertz. No matter how you're listening, when you're listening, or where you're listening from, I wish you good reception conditions, and I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. Well, before we get into anything else, Election Day has come and gone. I hope you got out and voted. I really sincerely hope you got out there to the polls and submitted your vote. On one very brief note, because then I want to go right to a discussion that I recorded the other day. It's something that's been on my mind. If you can, please send me a quick email right now if you're listening, vorwinfo@gmail.com. That's vorwinfo@gmail.com. I don't care how long you've been listening for. You could be a first-time listener. You can be listening on the shortwave, on an antique radio. You could be listening in on your smartphone or anything in between. Tune in, SoundCloud, any frequency. Please just let me know you're out there listening. You can make it as short, as simple as you would like, or as complicated as you would like. Let me know you're tuned in, vorwinfo@gmail.com. With that, stay tuned. A good discussion coming up on VORW. So I don't know how long today's talk is going to be, but I hope you can bear with me nonetheless. Regardless. I'm outside once again, yada yada yada, right, warm air, etc., etc. It's just a pleasant evening to record, and I like the space at least to essentially pace around to deliver my thoughts as well. Of course, I can do so behind the desk just fine, but it's enjoyable, needless to say, to be able to pace around while I share my thoughts. Well, anyway, today's talk isn't going to be a philosophical one. I really don't think it's going to be very motivational a talk, nor is it really going to discuss politics at all. And that's fine. I always try to keep this show very, very wide-ranging in terms of whatever it is that I talk about. Lately, of course, I have been discussing a lot of philosophical motivational discussions, and the last 2 weeks, actually, I talked about the election. And granted, it's all important stuff, but I have a feeling with Election Day having since passed, we're probably in one of two modes right now. A, thank gosh this is over with, and no more of this for a little while anyway. Or B, you're honed in more than ever for politics, but nonetheless, if that's what you're looking for, there's many, many radio stations and television and YouTube networks and everything across the board that will give you any political position or opinion you want. You can find it. And the philosophical stuff, if anything comes to mind, I'll talk about it next week. But today, I want to talk about technology. As I said, this show I'll talk about anything. If I had a mildly amusing experience whilst watching paint dry, I'll talk about that too. That hasn't happened yet, but if it does, I'll get back to you on that. But technology, well, what about technology anyway? Well, a few things. It's just going to be a few miscellaneous points that I'll try to tie it together. Might not be very pretty with a bow or anything, but I'll try to connect them. Really about the progression of technology, and just a few miscellaneous points that have... It's just one of those things that's really swirling around in my mind, and I thought, alright, I'm going to take to the microphone and lecture about this week. Number one, when it comes down to technology, in regards to this program, lately I've been thinking, and I think it's really the first time that this has ever really came to my mind, but part of me is thinking, with this radio show, should I start spending more time promoting this show on its online platforms and really curtail the shortwave broadcasts? I don't know. I don't want to, but I don't know. When I look at the listener analytics nowadays, the largest amount of correspondence comes from two places at this point, and it actually varies every couple of weeks. It's funny, but it does. TuneIn, the 6 p.m. Eastern TuneIn stream, probably gets the most. Usually, that's where the highest percentage comes in every Thursday. And then after that, the next highest percentage of correspondence comes from SoundCloud. And then everything else is kind of divided up between all the varying shortwave frequencies. But it does vary week to week. There will be times when propagation is really good and the shortwave signal just gets out there, and maybe I just did a better job promoting the frequencies and people just happen to listen, and people scanning around listen, where a shortwave broadcast will go out and I'll get 70 reception reports for it, and lots of people listening in. And then there will be other times when that same exact transmission will go out, same type of degree of promotion, and it'll get maybe 2 or 3 or maybe even 0 emails. Whereas the online streams are always guaranteed an audience in one way or another. So then that begs the question, well, what should I do? When it comes down to cost, I think in December I am going to be cutting back on a few stations just to save costs. I think as long as this program goes on, I'm always going to be doing the shortwave broadcasts. It's always going to be a thing. Right now it's shortwave and internet, and I think it's always going to stay that way. I think I'm always going to keep a few frequencies to, with the best blanket coverage to North America and perhaps South America, Caribbean mostly, that I can get. And then maybe more frivolous ones or whatever. Maybe we'll see what happens. See what the budget is looking like, and go from there. But I was thinking to myself the other day, I wonder, what emphasis should I be putting on this show? And that got me thinking, because again, I really don't know. As it stands now, I don't think I'm really going to change anything except a few cutbacks in December, as I said. We'll know more about that as it comes along. But it got me thinking about technology. And, I remember a question was posed to me. See how one thing just leads to another. It's how my trains of thought always go. It's like a chain reaction, one to the next, to the next, to the next. And a listener, I don't know who the person was off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you, but I remember someone suggested a topic. They said, what are your thoughts on the progression of technology, say within the last 10, 20 years? What do you think, for the future and its impact? I guess those dogs over there, maybe they're vocal supporters or opponents of it, I don't know. Here is my opinion. And I always stress this when I say opinion. Because sometimes I think people, where if you share your opinion about something, they take it as a factual statement or a set-in-stone belief. And maybe that's how some people interpret opinions, though. When I say my opinion, what I mean is, this is my viewpoint on it. These are my thoughts at the current time. They may be right. They may be unbelievably dead wrong. And you know what? If I find out that I was completely 100% wrong, I'll admit that I made the mistake, and I'll change my mind. One of those people, I'm willing to change my mind, look into new ideas, and all of that. Something I hope all of you consider as well. But anyway, it's not what I'm talking about today. Here's my opinion when it comes down to the advancement of technology overall. I think, look at it this way, okay? From 2011 to 2018, 7.5, close to 8 years have elapsed, right? From 2011 to 2018. In 2011, that's when I started my YouTube channel, The Report of the Week. That's why I kind of use it as that milestone, right? So think about that time frame, 2011 to 2018. And now look at the time frame from 2003, 2004 to 2011. To me, in my mind, I think of all the change that happened, technologically speaking, from 2003 to 2011 to be staggering. I mean, you look at the way computers, televisions, the way that they appeared, completely different in 2011. Everything went, granted this was already going on back in 2003, but it really became mainstream, where all the CRT, the cathode ray tube devices, went out. 2003, yeah, you would see so many of those boxy, those boxy computer monitors and the cathode ray television sets. Nowadays, it's, flat screen everything. Back in 2003, smartphones, what smartphones? People, texting was the thing, and a lot of people didn't even have phones. Back in 2003, all the social media sites that are so prevalent in today's world, so much so that, look at our own President of the United States. What is his platform of choice for the most part? Twitter. None of that was around back then, or if it was in its utter infancy. It wasn't used. Now you could draw some connections. You could say, look at the AOL chat rooms back in the early 2000s. To some extent, that can kind of be like how, maybe the popular apps like Discord can be today. Well, you can obviously draw some similarities. But you look at the changes that have happened. Look at the shortwave spectrum. How much more there was in 2003. Probably millions of listeners in the US still, and more stations than one could count being on the air still, to today, or I would say maybe probably 100,000 listeners a week to any and all shortwave stations in North America, and just a handful of good things to listen to, right? From 2003 to 2011, so much has changed. Then look from 2011 to 2018. Well, smartphones existed. They still exist. Yeah, they've been smoothed out a little. They have some better cameras and better performance. Social media, well, for the most part, all the giants that were around then are still around today. Just as popular, if not more so. Everyone glued to their phones. Same as it was in 2011, same as it is today. What about automobiles? Not so much has changed. The prevalence of hybrid vehicles, electric cars, maybe a little bit more, but nothing revolutionary. Social climate? That's one thing that has maybe changed a little bit, but a lot of the habits that existed then in regards to social media, they're still in place today. Have things stalled out? Have things stopped their rapid progression? Has the momentum died down? Because to me, that's what initially all signs point to. No, there have been advancements. There have been changes. And there have been many, many very significant advancements in many essential fields that just have gone unnoticed. It's not in vogue, however important it may be. It's just not as noteworthy. Technology still changes. Technology is still advancing. The one thing, perhaps, that I remain steadfast on, I think that the cultural impact of the advancement of technology, especially in regards to smartphones and social media, that in and of itself, the impact that it attained in the few short years that it was around is incredible. That was probably the biggest change that's happened in at least the 2000s so far. Because, look at it. Before 2007, I'll use my own life as an example. And I know sometimes that's not the best way to go about something, but as I said, this is pretty much an opinionated discussion. For those of you that don't know, I'm not the oldest person in the world. I said that before, and that's the honest truth. I'm in my 20s. So there you have it. The secret's out. It's revealed. Yes, I'm in my 20s. I'm a young person. But I remember 10 years ago, like how did I grow up? Now, granted, perhaps I am an outlier, but this goes in regards to everyone else who was my age that I saw at the same time. Well, I remember in 2007 and 2008, and I kind of stopped there. No one my age, as kids starting to get into adolescence, had smartphones, really used social media. When I was young, I did actually have a few friends. We would go out and we would just ride our bikes. Ride our scooters and bikes around the neighborhood, explore it. None of us had phones, none of us had social media, nor did we even know what it was. And I feel like I'm some aged grandpa telling this story. But then in just a few short years, from 2007 to 2010, all of a sudden everyone, it was like a blink of an eye, had a smartphone. And by 2011, everyone had a smartphone, social media profiles, and it's been that way ever since. And it's just amazing how when it comes down to technology, just how incredible that it was. What a drastic change, in my opinion. And it's something that I think I just personally haven't seen happen in the last 7-8 years. That did happen, I believe very confidently, in the 7 years before that. Some food for thought. And I even was overly optimistic. When people make predictions for the future, especially technologically speaking, there's two things to remember. Number one, things will be invented in the coming decades that are currently inconceivable to our imagination. It'd be like trying to explain social media and the internet to someone who was living in a rural farm in the 1940s. It's just something that it doesn't click. It's something that no one can really relate to because it hasn't been invented yet. Maybe with some aggressive explanation, but just off the bat like that, it's an inconceivable idea. No one will be able to understand it. So, first thing to consider, when it comes down to the future, things like that may very well come about. Where right now, we would have no idea even as to the concept, but it may become integral to our day-to-day lives before you know it. Something like that probably will happen. What it is, I don't know. No one really knows until someone goes ahead and invents it and it actually takes off. But I think that will happen at some point in the future. As for the things that we can relate to, however, in regards to our future predictions, this is my opinion again. I think that technological progression in the future is going to be slower than a lot of people hoped for. Good example, so to speak, is I was watching Stanley Kubrick's famous film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Incredible movie, of course. And this was during what people called the space age, in the late 1960s. And whether realistic or not, I think there were people in the 1950s and 60s that when they pictured the 2000s and the 2010s, I'm sure they expected us to have lunar colonies and exploring the other planets. And because you look, in 1900, no flight, let alone going to the moon. By 1960s, space flight, having a man on the moon, such incredible advancement, and I think people at the time thought, how would that not just kind of peter out and stop? But it did. But I think at the time a lot of people had very, very optimistic hopes for the future and how technology would end up being. That they thought that by the 2000s, we would have so much mastery over space travel. Well, look where we are. We haven't been to the moon since. No one's been to Mars. We have a few private enterprises like SpaceX and Blue Origin that are trying to do their best to do one thing or the next. NASA is still going, though. It's a shell of its former self. Most satellites launched into space are either for communication purposes or for military usage. And I think some people, if they were able to find out the state of things today in regards to that, say if you took someone from 1968 and explained how little has changed in that aspect, they would be disappointed. But I remember in 2011, because, and it still does today, numbers and I think what they call futurology interested me. I would always sometimes look at who the oldest people in the world were, and I'd look at the year that they were born, and say 1896. I'd look up the year and see how things were back then, and I'd think to today how much had changed in that span. And sometimes I would look up the 2020s, and I would see one video after the next that would say, you're going to have full-on integration of artificial intelligence into our day-to-day life. I remember seeing a video at the time that was published that was saying by 2020, everything is going to be smart, so to speak. You wake up, you're going to have a smart nightside table. And then you're going to get up and pull off your smart blankets. And you're going to go brush your teeth with a smart toothbrush while looking in the smart mirror. And then you're going to go down and look at the smart counter. And then you're going to go make yourself some breakfast, get your stuff out of the smart refrigerator and put it on the smart kitchen counter and the smart newspaper. And they were acting as if everything was going to have that internet integrated smart technology by the year 2020. It's not going to happen. You might try to argue, well, what about the Amazon Alexa devices or all of that? Well, those are around, and they certainly are increasing in prevalence, but people are treating it more as somewhat of a luxury, and maybe even a gimmick, rather than a absolute necessity for day-to-day life. So smart everything, that hasn't really caught on yet, nor will it in the 2020s yet. People were saying we're going to have solar roadways and everything is going to be fuel efficient. Now you're still going to see gas-guzzling sedans from the 1980s and 90s on the roads en masse in the 2020s. Things, they aren't going to change as fast as you would hope. perhaps. That's one thing that I've realized. I look at how things are now. How things were 7, 8 years ago. The progression of technology, while still doing so, I think has slowed. It started out in the 1900s as a full-on sprint. That decreased to a run, to a jog, and now to a bit of a walk. It hasn't stopped. Very likely won't stop. Unless, let's say, an EMP strikes, or something, a solar flare on the magnitude of the Carrington event. Boy, that's something to look up if you ever want to kind of creep yourself out. That would be catastrophic. Or a world war, or a natural disaster of such severity, such as Yellowstone exploding, that would set us back to a standstill. Things are going to continue, but I think that they will be at a much slower rate than what a lot of people end up predicting. That's my prediction. Predictions can be correct or incorrect. I may very well be proven wrong 5, 10 years from now. Who knows, right? That's my 2 cents. For those of you just tuning in, this is VORW Radio International, the voice of the Report of the Week. Your feedback is welcome. VORWINFO@gmail.com. That's VORWINFO@gmail.com. Please let me know that you're listening. Really need to know that there's people out there tuned in. VORWINFO@gmail.com. One last point about technology I want to bring up. And it's an interesting one because it's something that I really can't even take a clear position on the issue. Social media and smartphones. Is it beneficial or detrimental to society? I would say both, but more toward the side of beneficial at this point in time. But it has its terrible consequences, if you ask me. I used to be an extremely vocal critic of smartphones and social media. But I realize, that's just the way that the world is today. That's how it is. People have accepted smartphones and social media as part of their existence. That is what so many things in today's world revolve around. It's here to stay. As a result, there's no reason to be such a vocal critic of it in every regard, when this is literally what the world revolves around at this point. So, because something is, again, such an important part in our society and our day-to-day life, it has its relevancy. Smartphones and social media can be an incredible way for people to find news, get their opinions out, converse with others, and find wonderful things that they may have never found otherwise. And by things, it could be anything. Here's some of my criticisms, though. Some people will say, well, I think that social media has created an attitude of people being filled with hatred and antisocial and mean, nasty, arrogant, self-absorbed, etc., etc., etc. And people will use that as a very vocal attack against social media and smartphones. Now, I see where they're coming from, but I believe that all of those characteristics in the people that you see out there on those platforms that you think may exhibit them, social media, smartphones, that didn't act like any sort of poison. That didn't suddenly flip the switch and turn someone from Mr. Nice Guy into the complete a-hole that you see ranting and raving on the social media now. The people that you see who are like that always were that way. And the only thing that changed is that social media And that barrier, being able to look at an inanimate object, rather than having to go up to someone face to face, allows there to be that lack of direct connection, and they're able to express how they truly feel. Those people that you see being nasty on social media, they were just as nasty and vile people before any of that. It's as social media served as an outlet to finally let their true selves be revealed. It's not like social media poisoned them. They were always poisoned from the get-go. My main criticism with social media and smartphones is its impact on kids today. The one thing that disappoints me, not really the fact that people just give their little child a smartphone and let them go to town so that they can get off mommy and daddy's back and distract themselves for a while. No, that's okay. It's just the newest evolution of pretty much toys and being able to keep the little buggers, as some people say, occupied. This is just a technological evolution of that. What bothers me is, unless the parent sets up some sort of parental controls, the amount of absolutely obscene, horrific, disgusting things out there that a child can find by accident through a smartphone right on their fingertips. So sad. Just so sad. That's all that I can say about it. Where you have people, and they put their kids on YouTube just to watch children's videos, and the kids are just tapping around. They like the video. They end up going from one video to the next, to the next, to the next. And then they end up seeing such horrible, violent, graphic imagery, extremism, sexually explicit content. I hate to be this kind of person, but I just don't think that's right for any child to see. And that's what worries me the most. There's no real good case study as to what, perhaps if any, impact all of that might have on kids as they grow older, because the people who would be subject to that experimentation are still kids. That's what disappoints me the most. That it makes it so much easier for young children to stumble upon such horrific things. It's never been easier, and that's the sad part about it all. I guess my closing thoughts are, number one, people, they can get addicted to social media and technology and all of that, and it is a very important thing in our lives, our livelihood. I get it. But try to maintain some sort of balance for your own sanity, if nothing else. And the second thing, when it comes down to kids, and you might say, well, if you're so concerned about them being exposed to something, then what do you suggest? Well, just like in the good old days when kids just used a computer, have some sort of parental controls set up, some sort of regulation, until kids are old enough to think freely and independently, not be completely malleable. And that, too, needs to be within reason. People do need some freedom. I've seen apps out there that apparently, track someone's every move and, this, that, and the other thing, and I think that is an infringement of one's privacy, but that's my opinion anyway. There needs to be a balance. Where that balance lies, it's just an incredibly complicated situation, but I think one can be reached. I wanted to ramble on. I kind of changed my mind from what I would call this. This is not a lecture. This is just miscellaneous rambling, but I hope you enjoyed it. If anything, take it as like some light, casual conversation. Might not be a impassioned lecture, trying to prove one point or another, or trying to discuss one current event or another. It's just me doing a little bit of chit-chat in regards to something that's been on my mind. Well, if you have anything on your mind, feel free to write in. VORW Info@gmail.com. And my thanks go out to whoever suggested this topic about a month and a half ago. If you would like to suggest a topic for discussion on future programs, I might not end up talking about it, but I welcome it. I really do. If there's a topic you would like to hear me cover on future radio broadcasts, you have the power to do it. Suggest it. Send me an email, VORWINFO@gmail.com. Suggest any topic you want, and you never know. Next week's show might be dedicated to that topic that you suggested. Look, you have nothing to lose. Go ahead, make a suggestion at VORWINFO@gmail.com. And you know what? All that I ask is that you just let me know what means you're listening to this show by. So if you're listening in on shortwave, please let me know. Maybe tell me the frequency. If you're listening in on TuneIn, let me know. Listening in on SoundCloud, let me know. You can keep that really short, and then just go ahead, suggest whatever topic you want. VORWINFO@gmail.com. Not guaranteed to actually talk about the topics, but they're certainly all open to consideration. It's a blank slate. You have that option to pretty much fill it with something. You never know what'll come of it. With that being said, let's just jump into some music. Stay tuned for some tunage on VORW.